most joy?
My family, for one. Mostly my family. I guess that is my joy, my family. My name is JoAnn Reese Hamilton. I was born in Flint, Michigan in 1942. My parents were Ella Gillick and Earl Reese. And story about how they met. My mother's mother, Justine, was born in Russia, and her girlfriend, her best girlfriend, was a lady named I can't remember what her. She married a Grush, so I don't remember exactly what her name was, but they were girlfriends in Russia, and they immigrated to the U.S. and Mrs. Grush lived in Flint, Michigan, and my grandmother lived in Fon-de-Lac, Wisconsin. And my mother's sister Lydia, met Mrs. Grush's son, and they married. And at the wedding, my dad was in the wedding party, and my mother met my dad at the wedding, or at the rehearsal dinner, and she told me that she didn't like him because he was snooty. Anyway, they married, and she moved to Michigan, Flint, Michigan, which she was not happy doing, but she did it anyway. And I was born, I'm the oldest. I have a brother named Tom. I can remember going to kindergarten. I think that's probably about the first memory I have. We had quite a walk, and there was a boy that lived across the street. And I lived in a neighborhood of all boys. You know, all my cousins were boys. I was the only girl. And he and I used to walk a long ways. It was really a long ways for, I don't know how we did it. Being 5 years old, we crossed busy streets, and there wasn't any crossing yards back then. And I can remember coming home, and sometimes it was raining. We'd run up on porches to get out of the rain of people we didn't know and wait the rain out. And nowadays you would never do that. We had a modest home in Flint, 231 West Rankin Street. We had a park that was a block away that we used to play in a lot. But mostly we played in the street, and I played all boy things. Nobody wanted to play girl things. I played all baseball. We played baseball on the street. I broke windows. My dad never hollered at me when I can remember putting balls through this lady's window, went right through the front window. She had a big lamp sitting on a table right in front of the window. Luckily, didn't break that, but I went home and I said to my dad, I just broke a window. And he said, well, we'll take care of it. And he went down there and repaired the window. Never said anything. He was the sweetest man. My dad was a salesman. When I grew up, my parents only had one car. My mother was a stay-at-home mother until I was in high school. And then she went to work at an optical place that was right up the street. And the oldest relative I remember was my great-grandmother. I was very close to my grandparents. They lived probably 2 blocks from the school I went to, so that lots of times, if I didn't feel like riding the bus home, I would just walk to their house and Grandpa would take me home. My dad would pick me up. And his mother, my grandfather's mother, lived with them at the time, and she died. I think she was 96, and I was probably about 10 maybe when she passed away. So there was always an older person, and we used to have, that was another story, we used to have to go, and I shouldn't say have to, but every Sunday we went to my grandparents' house for dinner. And we Tom and I loved it, but my mother didn't like it very well. She didn't like to have to go over there every Sunday. She did grumble about it, and when my dad, after she passed away, my dad told me that she didn't like my grandpa Reese very much. But I never knew that, so she kept it quiet. She didn't ever show us that she didn't know she didn't like Grandpa Reese very much. Grandpa Reese was, I don't want to say domineering, but he was definitely the head of the household. But back then men were, and Grandma would just do whatever he said. She was a sweet lady too. Anyway, we'd go over there every day, every Sunday for dinner. And we'd have to, another thing I remember is we'd have to wash dishes. And it wasn't, I had to help. There was, all the ladies were in the kitchen taking care of the dishes. The men went in the living room. But Grandma, great grandma, she always wanted to wash. And she had a specific routine that she washed. She had to wash the glasses first, then the silverware, then the plates, and the last was the pots and pans. And that's the way she did it everywhere. Grandma always baked on Saturdays. So back then you had days that you did things. It was washing on Mondays and ironing on Tuesdays, and she always baked on Saturdays. But it took all day to do those kind of things because you didn't have just a washer. It was a big deal to washing clothes. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about my mother's parents. They were Germans from Russia, and they immigrated here in 1913. So my mother was first generation American, U.S. born. And anyway, they spoke German, not Russian. And they would speak, that was their first language, my mother's first language also. And they would be sitting around a table like this talking, and all of a sudden they would just start speaking German and didn't realize that they had changed over. And whenever my mother and her sisters and my grandparents were together, and they didn't want us kids knowing what they were saying, they would always speak in German. They lived in Fon-de-Lac, Wisconsin. Well, first this is an interesting story too, when they first immigrated, they came in through Portland, Maine. They were supposed to land in New York, but the weather was so bad, they diverted the ship into Portland, Maine. And they went into Chicago because they had a spot. I don't know how they do it nowadays, but back then you had to have a person that you were coming to. And this person was a cousin of my mother's, I think, and my grandmother's. And they went into Chicago. And Aunt Amelia was just a baby. And Grandpa was working at some kind of a shop there or something. And they didn't speak very, very much English. And Aunt Amelia was playing evidently out in the yard, and someone kidnapped her. And they, when they discovered that she was missing, of course they didn't speak any English, so they had to go to a corner store and get somebody to help them. And then they had to go to where Grandpa was working and get somebody to help him. And then they found her in another part of town, a long ways away. Some man had brought her into the police station. It took that she was gone all day. Anyway, that's kind of soured them on Chicago, so then they went to Fon-de-Lac. And that's where my mother was born. Aunt Lydia was born in Chicago, and my mother was born in Fon-de-Lac. And they lived in this house when we were kids. Dave and Andrew and I used to go sometimes in the summer and spend time with we didn't see them but maybe once a year. And Tom and Joel, I don't think ever went, not that I can recall. Maybe it's because they were younger. But I was, of course, the only girl again. And the boys, Dave and Andrew spent more time than I did with them. They had this beautiful flower garden. They just loved flowers. Grandpa worked in a tannery where he tanned leather. And I've often thought that probably his cancer was caused by some chemical thing he breathed in all those years. He had cancer, he died of cancer in the stomach. He was a very sweet man, very soft-spoken, didn't ever raise his voice. She ruled the roost in that household. He was very sweet. His temperament and my mother's temperament was more than Aunt Lyd was more tempered like Grandma. And Aunt Amelia, my mother, were more like Grandpa. They never had a car. I don't think ever had a car. They walked everywhere or rode the bus. And there was in that community, there was quite a group of Germans from Russia. They seemed to have different areas that they immigrated to. And Fon-de-lac was one of them. There was a big one in Chicago, too. I went to the parochial school from 1 through 8th grade. It was a very small school, and we had 2 grades in each classroom. Like the 1st and 2nd grade were together, and so we had the same teacher for 2 years. It was a very close group of kids. We did everything together through 8th grade. It was a very cultural shock when I went into a public school at 8th grade, in 8th grade. It's a rude awakening. I remember one time when I was a kid, I was probably maybe 9th grade, 10th grade. And I was standing on a driveway in Mason Street, and I was talking to a boy, and I don't know who the boy was, but I was talking to a boy, it was snowing, and I picked up a snowball, and I threw it at a car that was going by. And the guy had his window down, and it hit him right in his face, and he immediately stopped the car and came roaring up the driveway and screamed and hollered at the boy that was standing there. And I didn't even say anything. I just let that poor boy take all the blame. But I don't know if I ever told my parents about that. Loved high school. Loved school. Never complained about going to school. I was sad when I graduated. And I went to a hospital school of nursing where we went 3 years. I got a diploma. That was called a diploma school. And the 3 years that we worked in the hospital from 7 till 12, and then from 1 to 4 we went to school. And it cost, the school was, we lived in a dorm right across the street from the school, and they furnished our uniforms and all of our books, and they cleaned our rooms, did our laundry, and my parents paid $200 for the first year and $100 for the second and $100 for the third year. It cost them $400 for me to go to nursing school. But then again, I worked full time too. So, and then there was another interesting story. This dorm where we lived, it was there was only there was 2 boys in our class, but I don't know where they lived. I can't imagine where they lived. They didn't live with us. It was all the girls who were living in the dorm. We had a house mother. We had to be in the dorm by 10 o'clock, I think it was. And in our rooms, and it was a suite on one side and a bathroom and a room on the other side. There was 2 girls in each, so there was 4 of us that shared a bathroom. There was no telephones in the room. We had buzzers in there, and when we'd get a phone call, it would come to a switchboard at the door, and she would ring a buzzer that would ring in our room, and then we'd have to go look for a phone. That was there was a kitchen on each floor and in each wing actually, and they had phones there. But if your kitchen happened to be busy with somebody on the phone, then you had to go look for another phone. Things have come a long ways in those days. And we had, I thought of this the other day. I was eating, and we had classes on how to eat. You know, you never ate a piece of bread. You always had to cut it in half. It was just improper to eat a piece of bread like that. And I was thinking, that's really weird. We had classes on how to eat and how to act. Yeah. My first boyfriend his name was Gene. Gene was my first. Gene Sapel, who was a friend of your dad's. And I think that's actually how we met. I think we were on a double date, and the 2 of us, I was with Gene, and I don't know who he was with. I think that's how we met, if I remember right. Although I did know Bob was a year older than me, so he was in high school when I was, where Jim was already out. And Gene and Bob were real close, so that lots of times, when they were playing ball and out of town or whatever, the Hamiltons would, Bob's girlfriend and me would go with Jim's parents to the away games. So I actually knew Jim's parents before I knew him. I graduated training, graduated school the beginning of August, or the end of July. And I think it was 2 weeks later, I took my boards, which was, I want to say 2 days. I had to go to another town. And we took testing for 2 days. It was horrible. And then, I think 2 weeks after that, I got married. So, in graduating and preparing for my boards, I have no recollection of preparing for a wedding. My mother must have done it all. I can't, of course, weddings now then were just cake and ice cream in the church parlor, behind the church. And I can remember my mother had a buffet in the basement of our house that she invited people to. But I can't remember making, like I say, she must have done it all. I can't remember any plans. I can remember going and getting a dress. And my roommate, both my roommates got married within a month. We all 3 got married within a month. So I was in 2 other weddings plus my own in a month's time. And my one roommate, we had the same bridesmaid dresses so that everybody didn't have to buy another dress, So that's all I can remember. The other roommate, she's passed away now. We made our dresses for her wedding. And I think my mother must have done that because I didn't have time to do that. My 8th grade teacher was, his name was Mr. Wunderlich, Albert Wunderlich, and he was a friend of Grandpa Reese's. He and Grandpa Reese had a little potluck club, and Wunderlich's were in this. But he was the sweetest man, and I just thought the world of him. He lived right next to the school. Mr. Wunderlich played the organ at my wedding. JFK was killed in November, the first year Dad and I were married. We got married in August, and JFK was killed in November. And we were, I think I took Dad to work that day, and I was going to do some Christmas shopping. So I think he said that he was already at work when they announced it. So I think I must have been Christmas shopping when they announced that he had been shot. It was really, everybody knew it, but you didn't have. I don't know how they did that, because I can remember we all knew that it happened, but there wasn't a lot of, like now they would come over a loudspeaker or something and with the music or radios or whatever, but there wasn't music playing that I remember. I don't know how we found out. We were all glued to the TV for days on end. That's the first real big tragedy that I can remember. 9/11, I was sitting in the living room there watching the Today Show. And I can remember I called up Grandma and Grandpa. I said, "You got your television on? Turn your television on." That was another. That's those things you just never will forget, where you were, how you felt. And now isn't that sad that it's becoming so common?
Do you remember when Joelle was born?
Let's see. With you were. I woke up during the night, in the early morning, with my water breaking. But with her, oh, I know. I went to the doctor the day before. Nancy had delivered Lisa 4 days before, and I had went to the doctor on a Friday, and he said to me, he stripped my cervix, and he said, "You'll deliver tomorrow." And I started, and I did. But I was in labor 8 hours for her, and I think I was in labor 8 minutes for you. By the time it was long. And then I got up in the morning, took a shower, and then I went to call up Grandma, because she had to come and stay with JoAnn. And by the time she got there, Dad got me in the car, took me up to the hospital. I was going to look. We were born in the morning, so it was quick.
8 or something, 7 or 8.
By the time she got there, it was practically the June parked in the car while I was delivering the baby. I'm glad I didn't have another one, because I'd probably been one of those people on the side of the road. It was fast. And I can remember telling the doctor, I was so miserable the last 2 weeks with you because I was so big. And I can remember telling him I was going to have a big baby, and he kept saying, "No, JoAnn, this is going to be a normal baby." And when he delivered you, he said, "JoAnn, this is a big baby." I said, "Yes, I know." And I said to him, "I'll have a big baby any day. This was a breeze." When I was a kid, we had party line telephone. I mean, there was more than one household on your phone line. And it had a, you had to stand, there was a phone plugged into the wall, and you had to stand right there to do your telephoning. Now ours happened to be in the kitchen. We had a little kitchenette, kind of a little, actually it was like a booth where we ate dinner at. It was like a little, and the telephone was right across on the table, so you could sit down at the table and reach over to talk on the phone. But you had to, couldn't, I was trying to think, maybe it was different rings for the party line? I don't remember. I was trying to think about my phone number back on to the other day, and I couldn't remember what it was. And then we went to phone that had a long cord on it. Oh, that was when you were a kid, and you could drag it all over, but you didn't have phones everywhere. They were in one room, or two rooms. You usually had one on one end of the house, one on the other. I can remember too that there was our laundry and on Scenic View was in the basement. I probably told you this, and no phone down there. And Bob and Nancy lived right across the street. When you opened our garage door and looked out our garage door, you could look right into their front yard. And invariably, I'd be in the basement doing the laundry, and the phone would ring, and I'd have to run all the way upstairs. And it would, 9 times out of 10, it would be Jim's mother. And she'd say, "Is Bob home?" And I said, "I don't know, did you call over there?" And she'd say, "I don't want to bother him." And so I'd have to put the garage door up, look out there to see if Bob was home, and I'd have to go back. Oh, it was funny. Anyway, and then we had cell phone, and the first cell phone Dad had was huge. It came in a suitcase, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's probably in the garage.
No doubt. And that's another thing, we always had everything first. We had the big screen TV, remember that, in the family room with the big thing in the center of the
Projector.
Yeah. Everybody'd come over to watch the big events on our TV set.
Yeah.
He had the video camera he had the very first time was a huge thing, and it was a reel to reel recorder.
Yeah.
I can remember him setting that up to film the men walking on the moon. When we were kids, Tom always got asthma really bad, had a hard time breathing in August. So Grandma and Grandpa Reese would take us up to a cottage that her nephew owned on Manhattan Lake. And we'd stay up there with them for a couple of weeks. And because Tom breathed always better up north. So that was really, and my dad, when I was a kid, he had one week off a year. That's his vacation. And he always got it 4th of July. My mother always thought he got gypped out of a day because 4th of July he would have had off anyway, so it was not fair. But, and lots of times we would just go to a cottage up on the lakes. Those were our vacations. We never traveled anywhere like people do nowadays. We thought that was really great that we got to go up there for a week. But I think the most fun vacations were when you kids were little and we started going to the amusement parks and those kind of things. Cedar Point, seeing all that through your kids' eyes. That was the fun times. And going to the baseball games with you as kids. I think those were fun too. Now I wouldn't walk across the street to go to a baseball game. But it was fun when Jeff was playing. Hospital nursing was a rewarding joy, much more than working in an office. It was scary. I used to pray every morning driving to work. I used to pray that I could handle whatever was given to me. So it always worried me that I was handling somebody's most important person in their life. And I didn't want to make any mistakes. That was scary, but thank goodness it turned out okay. I can't remember losing anybody. Well, I remember people dying, but it wasn't something that was not unexpected or it was, I don't know. It was, I remember praying every day going to work on my way.